Okay guys, good morning. So far we've looked at karyotypes, which is how you can see if there's a genetic condition in a person. So today I want to show you another thing that scientists can use to kind of figure out things. This is called a pedigree, and not the dog food or cat food, but what they use a pedigree for is to lay out the different generations and to show the parents, grandparents, children, and so on. And then you can kind of trace if there's a possibility for any kind of genetic disorders. But it doesn't have to be a disorder. You can figure out if someone has a widow's peak or a hitchhiker's thumb just by using one of these charts. So let me show you the basic components here. Circles are always females and males are always squares. Those are the only shapes that they will use on a pedigree. Okay, so the reason they have different colors or whatnot in them, if they are empty like this, that means they are normal, quote unquote, or they don't have the particular trait that you're talking about. So if they are completely colored in, that means they have the trait or the disorder. And then if they are half colored in, that either means they are heterozygous, like big A, little a, or it can mean that they carry the trait, but they may not have it. Then if you have a line through a circle or a square, that means that person is dead. So you have to include everybody in a family tree or a pedigree, even if they're dead, because they may have even died from this particular disorder. So that's why you still show them on there. Okay, it's actually much more complicated than that. So we're not going to get into any of this because you wouldn't come across this, I don't think. But see how there's a double line through there? That means they're divorced. So that happens a lot in society today. You can have adoptions. You can have twins. So it's actually a lot more complicated than the one I showed you. So let me show you how this works here. If we did this Punnett square, remember XX is female. So this would be X, X. Oh, that yellow's bad. Let me change that. Okay, this would be XY. All right, this would be XX, and this would be XY. So every time a human couple decides to have kids, there's always a 50-50 chance it's going to be a boy or a girl. So let's put these two females in here. So what they do is they show the parents with a line joining them between. It used to show a marriage, but of course nowadays people do have children without being married. So it just shows they were a couple or they do have children. So then we would put the circles here for the two girls and then the squares here, oops, for the two boys. Come on. 1, 2. Okay, so that's what a family of 6 would look like with the mom, dad, 2 girls, and 2 boys. And something else that you need to consider when you're constructing one of these, you're supposed to put them down here by age. So the oldest sibling here, the youngest one here. Okay, so let me show you. This is my pedigree of my immediate family. So I'm going to go ahead and give y'all a hint and put that this is me right here. Okay, so I want you to help me figure out who everybody else is. I'm sure I used to talk about them enough. So this person here would be my husband. His name is David. And then these two are our sons. Ryan is older, so we'll put Ryan here and Adam here. So then who would this person be? See how we're not connected across the middle here. And it's a circle, so it's a female. This is my sister. Her name is Carrie. Okay, and this is her fiance, Stephen. She used to be married before, but if you notice, they did not have any children. So technically his genetics really don't matter for our family, right? Okay, so who would these two people be? These are our parents. So this would be my mom. This would be my dad. And then my mom's parents. So these would be my maternal grandparents. This would be Oma, which is German for grandmother. And this would be Opa, which is German for grandfather. And unfortunately, Oma, Opa, and my mom died in the last couple of years. So this is what's left in our pedigree. So just so you can see, marriages line across here, siblings line across the top, okay? And then these Roman numerals over here, which I haven't mentioned yet, those show generation numbers. Okay, so obviously that's going to continue, right? So when Ryan and Adam have children, that would be the 5th generation. Or if I decided to put my grandmother's parents up here, then all the numbers would move up. Okay, so some pedigrees actually show a letter under here or a number. So like if you're asking about a person, you could say, yeah, person number 2 in generation 3 or whatever. Okay, so that's a very simple pedigree there. All right, so we're not going to look at that page or that page. All right, so here's an example of a pedigree. This is just for puppies with some short tails, I think, and we're not going to practice it. I just want you to answer some questions for me. So this one has 4 generations, just like I showed in my pedigree. These are half colored in because that means they must carry the trait. So that would be like they have this genotype, okay? If they are completely filled in, that means they have the trait. So if it's recessive, it should be little a, and then the ones that don't have anything in them should have both dominant traits here. Okay, so that's how that works. All right, now let's take a look at this one. We haven't talked about Huntington's disease yet. It's actually very deadly, and unlike everything else we've talked about, this is a dominant trait. So what that means, if you see a capital H, it's bad. So Huntington's is a brain disorder that usually shows up between ages of 35 and 45. And the problem with that is most people have had children by that point. So they don't even know they have this disorder, and then they're having children. So in this case, all the capital H's are bad. And if you notice, we haven't even figured out over half of them yet. And we're not going to do that because it takes a little bit of time. But this family, because of this dominant trait, is actually screwed. It's pretty bad. Okay, so let me show you an example of one that has a recessive trait in it. So if you notice, this is a pretty big pedigree with lots of grandchildren and stuff in it. See how there's only 3 shapes that are colored in? That's how you know this is a recessive trait, because there's not very many and there's not one in every single generation. Okay, so this is recessive. All right, here's an example of a dominant trait, because you see one in every generation and probably half or more are colored in. Okay, so this would be like that Huntington's example. So for a dominant trait, maybe this is brown eyes. It could be something very simple, but it only takes 1 gene in order for the person to have this disorder or this trait. So that would be a dominant one. Okay, so how about this one? See how there's at least one in every single generation? This is a dominant trait again. Okay, how about this one? This one only has 2 colored in red in the entire pedigree, so I'd say this is a recessive trait. And I want to show you something here which you may not have noticed. You see how that's connected with a double line? I want you guys to look at it and tell me how those 2 people are related. Okay, so here's the grandparents. Here is a son and here is a daughter. Okay, they both have children. So that means, why is that a double line there? Those are first cousins that actually had children. It's called a consanguineous marriage. Illegal in North Carolina, by the way. First cousins anyway. So what happens is a lot of times if family members have children, recessive traits show up. So that's why it's actually illegal, because it's not safe sometimes. Okay, and then this one, I want you to notice if there is actually a pattern here. You see how all the squares that are blue are colored in completely? And then the circles, the ones that do have any color, mostly, except for one, are half colored in. Okay, this is something called a sex-linked trait because it is directly related to just the guys. So examples of this, which we'll talk about this later, are color blindness, male pattern baldness, hemophilia, diseases like that. Okay, what happens is, remember, with males, they're an XY, right? So they only have 1 X chromosome, whereas females have 2 X chromosomes. So sex-linked traits actually show up on the X chromosome. So for this guy here on the left, if he has 1 bad X, he's screwed. So if he has color blindness, he's colorblind. Whereas if I'm this female over here and I have one bad X, what do I have over here? It's almost like a spare tire. It's an extra X. So it takes over for the bad X, and then I am not colorblind, but this guy is. And something else that's interesting about that is sex-linked traits are given to guys from their mamas. So my husband, for example, started going bald when he was like 20, and he's not completely bald, but he's almost there. He actually got that gene from his mother. And his mother is not bald, trust me, but she gave him that gene. Okay, so what I'd like for y'all to do is watch this short video on pedigrees that I also have attached here, and then try the Google form on pedigrees, and then we'll move on to something else in a couple days. As always, email me if you have any questions.